Kia ora whānau, we are the Wormsleys. I'm Eden,
And I'm Kelsey Wormsley.
and we just want to share our testimony of how we met and a little bit about our background and that. Well, I'm Eden Wormsley I'm from Te Arawa, Huranga te rangi te marae, Te Arawa te iwi. I was, our whānau's from Whakarewarewa or Napuna area of Rotorua, but I was raised out Nongataha. Went to Kaharoa School and Rotorua Intermediate. And then amongst those times, they were good whānau times that we grew up. I've got two sisters. We used to always go house bussing when we were kids, and that was a real happy time for us. We used to always go places, whether it be racing or, our mum and dad took us around the North Island and a little bit of the South Island. Just looking back on our childhood, there was a lot of happy times, and there was a little bit of sad times as well. And it's taken over 6 years of man up and different types of counselling organisations to dig all this out. There were some things that happened to us as kids. Our bus was parked out the back of our house where us kids used to go and play a game called Rudy's or something yuck like that. It was happening all around at that time in different places, with different whānau. And in 2023 with the kōrero going around about sexualising children. I feel like I've lived a life from a sexualised child's point of view, and it can lead to a lot of dysfunctions, a lot of hurt, innocence. A big part of your life gets taken away when all that innocence goes. And amongst that time when between 6 or 7, that's when I first got my first guitar, and that's when the love of music first really started. Even though some bad things happened, I look back on getting my first guitar as my first real taste of, I knew I could just play the guitar and everyone would start clapping, so I just gravitated towards the music. Kept good grades and was pretty much a good kid. But just when the innocence and stuff like that has happened, you kind of mask all that stuff up behind, rugby, or you hide it behind and you dig it and it's buried right low inside you. Being, kind of having that upbringing, 11, 12 years old, having full-time girlfriends and, that could come round to my house, and, being in a serious relationship from 13 years old, was a big part in my decision for losing myself to methamphetamine. All of that type of trauma led to drinking at a young age, 12, 13, having beers, smoking marijuana, just, I suppose, trying to find that hole that has been taken. I come out of, just at the end of school, I entered the Smoke-Free Rockquest in Rotorua, and I found that music dream that I always had. So growing up, I always dreamt of singing in front of heaps of people, and some real Janet Jackson looking Māori girl dancing, and I didn't know what those dreams were about until later on in my life, when I get to the part where I meet my darling. So I was, like I said, in a serious relationship from 13, 14 years old. There's a lot of dysfunctions, a lot of suicidal, there's a lot of suicide attempts, a lot of drinking, that party scene, a lot of party pools and stuff like that, which led me to joining a rock band. We used to play music, copious ale, and in that scene, that's when really the door opened for methamphetamine. Up until that time, I'd only really been a drinker and the occasional marijuana smoker. But once I had that first taste, it just hooked me. I remember in high school seeing meth addicts on the wall, and I was like, how no will I ever be like that? But whānau, if you don't deal with things that are deep within you, that's the life where it leads you to. So I had my own home. I was a qualified builder at a young age, at 21 years old. Had my own home. I was engaged, but I was just so unhappy because it just didn't didn't really work out. I couldn't be who I was. That musician deep inside me. There was a lot of still hurt and trauma that still hadn't come out yet. And so about when I was about 24, when I was about 24, I was in my home. I'd lost, I was just going through partners, and I was all alone in my house out in Ongataha. I bought a home out there, and it just got to this point where I had my home. No one would even come visit me. I had these dark demons and secrets that I'd never shared with anybody, and I was considering suicide. I had everything prepared and everything like that in my house to complete it that day, and I was having my kind of last day of life, and that's when my cousin rang me up. This is a shout out to Chris Duff and Jen. They rang me up and said, Jim, my cuz, there's a jam up at the Kala bar. You're from Nongataha, you have to be there. And I said, nah, my cuz, I just want to be dumb today, is what I said. I just want to be dumb. I just want to have a lazy dumb day. He just wouldn't take no for an answer. Kept on going, look, I'll shout you and all that. So I just thought, well, if it's my last day, I said to my cuz, you better have a fat wallet. Let's go to that pub and let's do this. So I put all the rope and everything aside, and my cousin, when I got off the phone, pretty much the cousin was there. So I just chucked on the first pair of jeans and hoodie that I had and went down to the Kala bar Nongataha in 2015. And that's when I walked in. That's when I saw my beautiful darling Kelsey. Wow, what an anahira. What an angel whānau. Oh. And that's when I first, it just felt like her and I were there, and it was a magical moment. It was like being, it was like touched by God in that. So I'll let my wife, so that's when I met my beautiful wife. So I'll let her tell her side of the story, and we can go from there.
Yeah. Awesome, honey. Kia ora whānau. Yes, so that day, actually I'll quickly backtrack to my little upbringing too, just as Eden shared his, just to kind of paint the picture of my life and leading up to meeting my husband. So I was born here in Rotorua also, and basically I was born into family violence, and that was a real hard time. I'm the youngest of 4, and I'm going to try and share this without crying, but it was a hard time. Violence was every day. I was just, as a child, I really grew fear at the age of 2, and I was fearful for my life and for my family. from someone that should be caring for us. But yeah, it was a very hard time. Violence was every day, family violence. And we were in and out of the women's refuge. That was going for the first 4 years of my life, and until my mum and dad broke up, and we were able to move away to Waimana. So that's where we found hope, and we're able to find a better tomorrow. So raised by my mum, she held it down. She did everything and anything for us to protect us kids, and there was no more violence, and that was really good. But it wasn't, to me it was like weird, because I was so used to the violence, like it was normal to me. So I thought like expressing your love was through, punching, and that was the representative of love in my life. So when I started seeing other parents loving each other and loving their children, I was like, that's so weird, like why are they like that? But not realizing that that was actually love. But to me, my version of love was distorted through violence and anger. So there was a lot of relearning for me. Even though I was only 4, I had to took me years to realize that coming from violence and family violence, that is not okay. It's not normal. It's not what families or relationships look like. So that took me years to discover that. But as a child, as much as I was scared of my dad, I missed him. I was always, going, where's my dad? I want to see him, even though I knew that wasn't safe and, good for us kids. And I still wanted my dad in my life. So living in Waimana, we had a good childhood after we started that process of healing. Growing up on the farm and living off the land was really some positives in our lives. But not realizing that the pain from it all was still inside us and still inside me, and that would eventually come to play in my life, especially in my teenage years. So my mum was raising us by herself, no support whatsoever from my dad, and due to that, we're living quite poor, but my mum was doing the best that she could with what she had at the time. So we never went without. But it was a real hard time. But yeah, when I came into like my high school years, it all just came out of my life and manifested in a really bad way. I started to rebel. I started running away from home. I found love through other things and like gangs. And I would just go partying and hang out with gangs and gang members and start smoking weed, start drinking, and just being a real, I was like just really bad whānau. Looking back, but at the time I know I was just longing for my father's love and that stability and that protection that I never had, and so I went out, was drinking, partying, and that caught up to me real quick though. One party I went to changed my life, where I was actually gang bashed. 15 years old, I was gang bashed. So much so that I ended up in Waikato Hospital. In fact, the doctor said one more hit to the head and I wouldn't have made it. I would have been kua mate. Just, a story in the front papers. That was almost my story. And so that night, getting gang bashed, waking up thinking it was a nightmare, but not being able to open my eyes, I was soon realised that it was reality. It wasn't just a bad dream. And had to have surgery, had to go to Waikato for a few weeks. And I just remember having so much anger and regret and all in one time. And my anger was towards myself, but also my upbringing and my absent father, and all of it all came at one time, realizing that I could have lost my life that night. And after all the medical care that I needed, we had to do family court, and there were 5 that were charged. One was over age, so she was in the normal court system, whereas the under 18s were in family court. So that was a really challenging time for me because I was so filled with shame, but I had to put on a brave face to deal with this. And I felt like I had to be an adult, I was no longer a child, making these big adult decisions. But it came down to me and what I chose to do at the end. They were facing guilty by association, or they no, sorry. They were dealing with intent to kill is what they were given. Intent to kill, and but at the end the judge asked me what I wanted to do. Whether I wanted to forgive them or let them face the consequences from the through the court. And I had to really dig deep within, and after making the decision, I decided to forgive them. And it was just something I felt inside, like I felt like that had to happen for me to stop that crazy path I was going down with alcohol and partying and boys. And it was like I felt inside that that was a sign and a wake up for me. And I felt in my heart that I needed to forgive them. So, to my family's, disappointment, because they really wanted them to, be held accountable for their actions, but I chose to forgive them and everything was dropped. And that was really the time where I felt like God was real. I really felt like he was there with me. And I really felt this peace come upon me when I forgave them. And yeah, that felt good at the time. But I didn't realise the effect afterwards, going home and not realising the things that would follow in my life, which was depression. I still felt, I still held shame within me, especially returning back to school knowing everyone knew. And I was only 15, so I was still quite immature in how I thought. And so I thought everyone would be, laughing at me and talking about me, so I chose not to go to school for a while. And I was still numb. Even though I had forgiven them, I still carried that shame, blame, and through that I got depressed. I started smoking cigarettes, and but eventually I did return back to school, and I was able to actually finish school and complete my NCEAs. I was still able to, I guess it came from that when I was going through that time where I was forgiving, and I felt some healing take place, and I started writing everything down and turning them into raps, and I found healing through that. So I started writing raps, I started writing songs, and that was giving me a sense of purpose in life. I was able to take that traumatic event in my life and turn it around to a more positive thing through music. So that's when I realized I I found, yeah, my purpose in life was through music and a way to heal through that trauma. And yeah, so I finished high school and I moved to Rotorua so I can study there. And excuse me. But during that time, at 16, I gave my heart to the Lord. So during that time, I was writing raps, and writing songs. I actually had an opportunity where I actually missed the bus, the school busing, because we lived out Waimana. It was like a 20-minute drive back, so I had to catch a ride with an auntie from Waimana. She said, yes, of course I can go with her, but I have to go to youth night at their church. And I was like, oh no. So I was like, oh yep, okay. So I just thought I'll just sit in the car and wait for the youth night to finish. But she was like, come inside, don't sit outside. So I thought, fair enough. I went in, and honestly, I've never seen such a thing. Like, I saw so many youth and rangatahi like having fun without alcohol around, and I thought, what is going on here? And I wanted what they got, So through the night, I was having a good time, and then at the end, they said, "Does anyone want to give their heart to the Lord?" And next thing, my hand flies up. And so I gave my heart to the Lord. I was 16 years old, and that was the best decision I could ever make for my life. And that is the turning point in my life. Like, honestly, after that, and then that was a Friday, and then I went to church on Sunday, and I felt like Pastor Destiny Whakatane, Pastor Andre, just spoke. It's like his message was directly for me. It just like it was just for me type of thing. And I felt it in my heart, and then yep, sure enough, I gave my heart again. Went up, got salvation, and honestly, God just like boom, like he worked in my life. I felt like lots just came off of me. Lots of hurt, pain, anger, all that yucky feeling I had from, being gang bashed, all the shame, blame, it just all was removed. And honestly, my life just turned around. I think the next day, if not the day after, I just walked into, because I just wanted a job. Like, I wanted to start that, mahi journey, and I was like, I want a job. So I just walked into warehouse stationery, and I was like, kia ora, I'm here, I'm looking for a job. And then not knowing that there was 10 other people who actually applied for an actual position they were looking for. I had no idea. I just walked in. I was actually getting stationery, and I was just like, oh, where's the boss? And then he comes out, oh, hello. And I'm like, I'm here for a job. Like, I'm looking for a job. And he was just like, when can you start? And I'm like, are you for real? But I was just, after giving my heart that weekend, I just had so much confidence within myself. And I felt like, that cheeky faith, like all things are possible type of thing. So I walk in and I ask for a job, and I got it straight away. And I started the next week. And yeah, so that was cool. That was a good time in my life where I was able to go to work, start being more responsible. I started paying board, paid my way at home from 16. Um, and I worked there for a few years until I realised I wanted to study. So I decided, after doing really well in church in Whakatane, I was serving in the music ministry. I had a good job. I had my license, a car, all of that, and I was like, I'm ready to take on the world now. So I moved to Rotorua and I get planted into that Rotorua church, and everything was going well. I carried on my music ministry there. I got a job here and I was studying here. But I kind of got caught up in just in a relationship. I thought I could I'll bring him into church, and but it didn't kind of work out that way. And I was in that relationship for 3 years, and during that time it was very, it was, had some good times, but really it was a distraction, and it was a really it ended up being a really bad time in my life. And I left church, and went a bit downhill, to be honest. And I remember I was working at Calabar, Rotorua, and I remember just being so miserable. Like, I was so in a bad place, and I just cried out to God in the chiller as I'm restocking the alcohol. I'm in there praying my heart out because I'm like so far gone from that life I had created in God. I just pour my heart out to God in the chiller, and I'm like, please, Lord, please bring me someone that's gonna love me, and please, I really just tapped in, and I really wanted better for myself. And I knew deep down that that God did have better for me. So I prayed my heart out. And next thing, I come out of the chiller and to the counter, and in walks this guy I've never seen in my whole life. And honestly, it was just, that saying, love at first sight. I used to think that was such a cheesy saying, but honestly, it was like that. It was like, to me, okay, this is going to sound corny, but it was like, hallelujah. It was like that type of moment. And he walked in, and I just knew that he was the one. I know that sounds a bit, whoa, calm down, but really, I just knew it. And I prayed it just, seconds before, and then boom, it happened. I was just like, whoa. And honestly, it was like he and I was the only ones in the room. Like, I kid you not, I needed to know who he was, and I just was so taken by this person, and I felt it within. So yeah, that was when I met this amazing guy here. And that was like, honestly, that point in my life when I was like, I felt so sure about something. I felt so sure. And yes, we eventually got to talking. After looking at each other for like, most of the night, like doing the looks. Oh, where? But he actually came up and he started the conversation, and he asked me, "Are you a musician?" Because it was a jam night. I don't actually work Sundays because of church, but I covered a shift, and it was a jam night, and he was there for the music night, jam night. And I had to take a moment to think about that question when he asked me if I was a musician or a singer, because I lost myself so, much in the past 3 years that I actually forgot I was a singer. I forgot that that was something I enjoyed doing. So when he said that, I paused for a second, and I am actually. And then we started talking, and we had that sort of foundation to like talk about, and um it just really reminded me of who I am, and that's what really really got me, was our conversations at the start. And there was some laughs, like when but I'll save that part of the story for another time. But there was some laughs that were had that night.
Yes.
And that was the night I met Aiden, not knowing that he was going through a dark time in his life also, as I. But yeah, once we met, it was definitely a moment from God. Like, I felt definitely God was in that.
And so, a couple of weeks later, we meet up and we start going on dates and that, because I never met a wahine or a woman that was so staunch about church and that. She even had like a ring on for no sex before marriage and that, and coming from the world that I have been from, that was just unheard of. So it just got me more intrigued. Going from a dark day to finding finding your love partner or your other half. I thought that alone would be enough to stop the drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. Kels did ask me, "Oh, do you like free music and free kais?" And I was just like, those are my two favourite things. And they were having a Destiny Church outreach just behind Nongataha Shops. And that's when at first, I didn't really know too much about Christianity. I thought Christian was just like bringing that like little A-frame with the Noah stories and that on it. I thought from in the primary school days, but no, this movement was young. It was music. It was people giving their hearts, people changing their lives from drugs and all that. And that's when I gave my heart. That's the first time I gave my heart to the Lord. And that's when I answered the call to Jesus Christ and made him my Lord and Saviour. And also to thinking that too would just kill all the drugs and alcohol and all the hurt and pain. But even though when we got together, like I did I reduced it, or like I felt like I was cleaner at that point. But I still, even at that point, I didn't know about all of this hurt and that of my childhood and stuff like that. So next thing, I'm at Destiny Church Rotorua, and I'm up there singing in church, and I just found a new lease on life. But again, I hadn't dealt with all of my past hurts. That was about when Man Up started. It was about that time. It was actually when I sat around with all the pastors and the elders in the church and experienced Christians, and they were opening up about stuff like I'd been brought up with. It's very similar, and that was actually quite confronting. When I went to the first Man Up, I didn't come back for probably a year or so, 2 years after that, because it was too much. So, things, that little kind of like the evil side of me kind of comes into our relationship. And next thing, like within 3 months, we've got a baby on the way. Yeah. I suppose my past caught up on us. And so, yeah, about 3 months, I had my building business and that. About 3 months before boy was born, IRD takes 23,000 off me, and which was my little nest egg for my boys. So with that gone, I turned to drugs and dealing methamphetamine from my house. Kels didn't even know about it. And yeah, when we'll share testimonies about our children at another one. We'll just keep this just to us, because each birth is just miraculous God intervention, and that. And in Quarter's birth, that's where we saw the presence of God. But it still wasn't enough to take me away from that life. Like the night that Quarter was born, like I went home and smoked meth and went back and just was a crazy partner for Kels, made it hard for her, and it kind of all come to an ugly head, really. Probably about 3 months when Quarter was born, I was getting too angry. I hadn't had enough sleep, and I was lashing out. It didn't get physical, but it was verbal, and I was all of the snowball of all that kind of came to a head where I had to, where Kels actually left with Quarter, which it was the best thing to do. Yeah.
So that was a difficult decision to make, though, because I had so much love for Eden, but something inside me was like, that mama bear that you just become when you have a new baby. And I knew, especially the life I had growing up with, it started flashing back all those triggering moments when we would get into altercations. I would be like, whoa, that used to happen when I was a baby. I would watch that, and I didn't want that for our son. So with all of that going on and realizing, like, for the first time, because I didn't know anything about meth, I didn't know what it looked like. I still to this day don't know what it looked like, but I didn't know what that was. I just thought he had like a crazy form of baby blues that that is out there. And I thought, oh my gosh, or he might be traumatized by the birth because we almost lost our son. Like, I was like thinking that might be the reason why he's acting that type of way, but not realizing at the time that it was actually he went back to meth.
So yeah, it was like 3 months. So, and then it was all into family courts and that, and I had a lawyer, she had a lawyer, and they were pretty much said to me, like, if you've got any drugs in your system, that's it, you don't get to see your children. And it took that for me to turn around. It was actually on my 30th birthday was the last time that I had, so that day we were fighting in court and that, and then they couldn't come, so it just made me angry and all that feel that old type of way. Back in those days, my friends used to just bring money for my birthday, so next thing I've heaps of money and a meth addict walks in or a drug dealer. But it was when I jumped on the car with them and I said to them, hey, what's up with your kids? And they reckon that they couldn't see their kids because they were on meth. And it broke my heart. So I just gave them the drugs and I walked home to Rangataha. And I just realised from that point on that I wanted to change my life. I ended up selling the house that we were in, and so just blew the money on disgusting things. That's another testimony for another time. But it was, and also too, I didn't know how to be a dad, new dad. It was scary as well. But pretty much when we're in the morning of family court, my lawyer rings me and said, "Hey, have you got drugs in your system?" And I said yes, and he said he was pretty much stuffed. So we went to Whakatane, and Kels and I sat opposite each other, and yeah, the verdict was pretty much that I was gonna have nothing, and it was a lunch break or something. We met up after the lunch break, and Kels came up to me and said, "You change from now, well, that's it." And I said I want to change, and then she goes, "Okay, you go into that." So we went into the courtroom holding hands, and we said, "We don't need you guys anymore. We want to sort this out.
Yeah.
We don't want to have what Kels, had, and that broken."
And that cycle.
So yeah, I ended up doing counselling. Awhi whānau is a good one in Rotorua whānau if you want to get involved, and Man Up. And I also did vocal training with Turanga Merito, and I found out that like the music was like therapy for me. I was writing down songs about, and this is where Freedom Aotearoa, if you can see our hats, that's where the idea of just freeing, that the music frees us.
Yeah, for sure.
And I wrote a song called Learn to Love Again, and it was pretty much on that day that we turned it around. And yeah, we went back to church. So pretty much on my 1 year clean, the day before, that's when we got married.
Yeah.
It was in a time where we shouldn't have. We were still bickering and arguing and that, but we had Jesus as our core. We had love in our hearts, and yeah, that's when we got married, which was one of the best things we ever did. It brought us closer together. We actually, not long after we got married, we lost the baby.
Yeah,
we lost
did,
a little.
Unfortunately, we had a miscarriage. Looking back, you would think that we would have got angry with God, or it could have went the other way, and we could have went back to our old ways where we would turn to drugs or alcohol, or lash out at each other. It's your fault, it's my fault, it's you the reason. But this time we actually go, hey, we need to get to the house of God. Like it was the Saturday was the next day of after our miscarriage, and we were like, let's get to the house of God, because right now with this amount of pain that we're feeling, we really need to be where God is. And
so we got baptized the next day. We pushed into God.
So we went to church, and they actually had a baptism going on, but also a child dedication. And we
gave our hearts, we got baptized and got the Holy Spirit. But we've just got to go pick up our son. It's 5 to 3.
Oh.
Anyway, it's 5 to 3. So that's just a kind of a highlighted version. We did end up having our boy, Eden, who just turned 4. We had our baby girl, which is just a little recap just to sign us off. There's just so much kōrero that we have.
Yeah.
And if you want to sign in or sign up to our channel, we just know that through the music, through God, through talking, we can get through these types of things. Now, today, I'm 6 years clean, 5 years marriage. We've got
the 5th baby on the way.
Tune in, and we've got some more. coming
got
this way.
some really good kōrero coming.
So we'll say ka kite.
Ka kite!
Love you all.
God bless.